An astonishing and remarkable development in this country's fairly short history is this. In about 15 years or less, the American people went through a deep, basic, and profound change of attitude toward the rest of the world. That, of course, is now taken for granted, but seen in any perspective at all, it is remarkable. Not long ago, had there been trouble in Vietnam, most Americans would A, not have known where it was, B, cared, or C, had the faintest thought it was up to us to do anything about it. So now we are concerned with what happens everywhere and not only willing but anxious to do something. Tonight, a brief look at how this new commitment to the world is seen in what might be called out-of-the-way places. Not every RFD box holder is waiting impatiently for the paper to come so he can read Walter Lippmann, and the circulation of Foreign Affairs Quarterly is not as big as Capper's Farmer. But across the country, there are groups of people who meet regularly in living rooms, union halls, school buildings, and even in laundromats while the clothes are drying for organized discussions of American foreign policy. Klamath Falls, Oregon is on the flyway of about 8 million ducks and geese migrating to and from Canada. And when they pass through, there are about 20,000 in view here. It is a splendid sight for hunters, photographers, and those who just like to look and listen. Most of this lake is a wildlife refuge, but a part of it is open to hunters in season, and they come in such numbers the hotels and motels have signs reading, "Please do not pick ducks or geese in this room." Klamath Falls has no falls, but it has 17,000 people, lumbering and potato farming, some dissatisfaction of low prices now paid for both, and it has Ben Kearns. He and his family own a farm equipment store that started as a blacksmith shop, and every morning at 7 o'clock in the attic of the store, he does a program on the local radio station reading classified ads on the air.
Now let's see what Best Buys you've sent in for a Monday morning. For sale, one white satin wedding dress, size 12, worn just once. Well, I should hope so. It's 62231 after 11 if you need a good white satin wedding dress in a hurry. 62231 after 11. Wanted, good used mandolin, reasonably priced. Please call 60093. Free manure, U-Haul. Good rich barnyard fertilizer, call 68932. Well, there's your chance for spring here for good rich barnyard fertilizer. Call 68932.
But the basis of the economy is not used wedding dresses and mandolins, it's the lumber industry. And the Weyerhaeuser Company, seen here at work, is the biggest payroll in town. Lumberjacks are not the roughnecks they used to be. Now they make $3.30 an hour and they go home at night. And while they cut trees that are 200 years old, the company has a careful system of planting new ones and letting them grow. Lumber prices are not good and several mills have shut down, but it remains the biggest industry here, as in all of Oregon. The other money is in potatoes, so-called Idaho potatoes raised in Oregon. This one warehouse handles 40 tons a day. They are sorted, graded, sprayed with a chemical to keep them from sprouting, and then shipped everywhere, ready for baking and the sour cream. And Klamath Falls has what is called a Great Decisions Group. The Foreign Policy Association, for $1.50, mails each member printed discussion materials, and they then lay aside duck hunting, lumbering, and farming, and gather to talk about Laos and Vietnam, led by Ben Kearns.
The conference in Paris that the U.S. had a vital interest in maintaining independence in South Vietnam, and also a war just broke out in Laos. What are our interests there? Why is Dean Rusk making statements about these countries halfway around the world?
I think that if we pull out or are pushed out, that our prestige as a world leader will suffer immensely, that we will never gain the trust of an Asian nor probably an African nation for quite some time.
We're in so deeply now, and our prestige is so involved that I'm afraid we're going to have to stay there. Personally, I think it's quite unfortunate that we've got ourselves in this situation.
Well, I don't think that the American public has been treated fairly by the State Department or our government, whichever way you want to put it. I don't think that we've been allowed to have the information that we need to make decisions ourselves, but we were kept in the dark all the time. And then these things are popped open to us all of a sudden. This is what has happened, and we've had nothing to say or even to think about it.
The group includes the county librarian, Betty Cody, Dr. Miriam Luke, who patches up the Klamath Indians after their fights and whose house this is, Fred Spears, the janitor at the elementary school,
Be calm,
Marian Geary, whose husband raises cattle and bent grass, Arthur Rice, who moved from dairy farming in the east to cattle ranching in the west, Tuffy Paulette, a housewife, a former school teacher, Barbara Hyatt, a housewife, her husband is a salesman, Martin Paulette, a junior high math teacher who taught in Guam for 2 years and soon will go back. Before the meeting, each one has already read the Foreign Policy Association's fact sheet.
I just wonder if our policy in the whole Southeastern Asia has been right from the time of the finish of the French Indochina War. It seems to me something has been dreadfully wrong, that we didn't need to be in the mess we are there now.
But we can't play the record over.
No, I know
We're
we can.
in, and if you were Dean Rusk, you'd have to make a decision now.
Yes, thank God I'm not.
Well, would you send troops? You wouldn't, I take it.
We're all right, but our policy was
I
poor.
will negotiate, and if Russia is willing to negotiate and work with us, I certainly would do anything before I'd want an all-out war over there.
Not me. All I've seen, I'd want to get in there, and when they were ready to negotiate, that means they don't want any more fighting. They want some time. That's the time to get in there and knock the dickens out of it.
If we take a stand, as we did in Cuba, and say, this is it, this is the line, we'll go no further, I think that China will stop as Russia stopped in Cuba.
It's tragic that we can't grow up enough to turn to the United Nations and let these disputes be settled in a civilized way.
Well, we
And give the United Nations strength to do it. The United Nations haven't done it.
Montrose, Colorado, cattle and sheep country. Unbelievable scenery, just west of the Continental Divide. "72 years ago, they drove out the Ute Indians and started the town of Montrose. Its population by now has swollen to 5,000. The first mayor rode out of town drunk, shooting his pistol in all directions, and has not been seen since. Now, Montrose has 5 bars, one for each 1,000 people. It also has an active chapter of the WCTU, which installed a water fountain on the courthouse lawn across from the Elks Club, which has its own bar. It used to be a railroad center hauling out the lead from Leadville. Now they keep locomotive 278 as a souvenir. A few years ago, one of the enduring cliches of the movie theater newsreels was filmed from a sheep ranch, and a narrator who always began by saying in jovial tones, "It's sheep shearing time in the Rocky Mountains." Well, it still is. And a clipper gets 30 cents for shaving a ewe and 60 cents for shaving a ram, which is the kind of information you certainly don't get on other television programs. The clippers migrate from place to place like the old-time Western dentists, and they insist that sheep are the dumbest animals alive. Also seen around Montrose are trout ranches, and this is a sort of roundup. This ranch has 7 ponds, 100,000 Colorado brook trout in each. They are sold to other hatcheries or anyone who wants them for 90 cents a pound. And, of course, cattle ranching.
Ho, cattle, ho! Ho, cattle, ho! Yeah, 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 yeah.
This one run by Sam Keeter and his wife, Charlotte. He is an ex-engineer, ex-airplane pilot, now running a small herd of Santa Gertrudis, the first completely American breed of beef cattle, originated on the King Ranch in Texas in 1918. Now said to grow faster and produce leaner beef, and also to have the noblest character and sweetest disposition of any cattle. Anyway, when he isn't working on his ranch, Keeter joins a great decisions group in his living room. He says he got into it because he likes to talk and argue, and they, too, the week we were there, were discussing Laos and Vietnam.
Week
our discussion series and to the most...
Other members are Bob Spiro, local public relations man for the Rural Electrification Administration,
I'd like to begin our
Wally Wagner, the county agent who got this group started,
President Kennedy.
Lynn Andrus, a high school gym teacher, all listening to Jim Parker, a Montrose minister.
Established neutrality of Laos.
You remember our previous discussion, what I said about neutralism? There is no such thing as a neutralist or riding a fence. You're on one side or the other. Or you have to become that way sooner or
Sam,
later.
don't you believe in coexistence?
Coexistence?
Yeah.
With whom?
Well, with whom? I mean, with whom are we coexisting? We're not coexisting with...
I sure
with
believe
each other.
I do, but I don't think they do.
We've been coexisting with those people, supposedly, since 1945.
Bob, we've coexisted to the point now where they just put in the hot line so that we don't make any mistakes and blow each other off the line.
Yeah.
Why, we're tense, man. We're really tense.
Well, isn't everybody tense over this thing?
But is that coexistence?
They are coexisting in the sense that they're not going to force us into a major war. They keep 20,000 guerrillas active in Vietnam, and according to the news tonight, they've reconciled themselves that this is going to be a long war, and they're going to maintain war on a more regular basis, actually active units facing the Vietnamese army.
Our military action is the only action that keeps the communists contained anywhere.
Anytime we can keep anybody from becoming communist, that's the deal.
Would you go to war over Vietnam and Laos?
I would.
This is a question.
I would.
Well, because
I think
now,
it's important.
And as far as the CETO is concerned, I think it's very important. What has it done? Well, our partners in CETO, France, they haven't won a war in 100 years, or any other kind of contest. And England always wants to negotiate, and negotiating with communists, I don't believe gets you much of anywhere, only loss.
maybe I haven't read enough on this thing, but I don't think CETO is any value over there. Because there seems like every time we start something, England and France backs out, and we sit there. I think we should go ahead and clean up the mess.
Here's something that I really can't do as the rest of you have been doing here. You've been knocking CETO. And I believe a friend is a friend is a friend to work some particular individual over. And I don't believe that... I don't believe we can sell anybody short. Now, the only time I think we ever have to fear our friends is in peace. We don't really have to fear them in war.
We can't afford them then.
That's right. We can't afford them in the peacetime, but we don't have to fear them in wartime because they've been backing us pretty well.
I wouldn't worry about CETO at all. I'd start worrying about my backyard. Because I believe it's more important for us to worry about what's happening in South America and in Canada than it is to be worrying about what's happening in a small group, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of miles away, that's primitive and has no effect on us whatsoever, I don't believe.
We really ought to withdraw completely from Southeast Asia.
Perhaps they'd be quite happy with communism. Let them worry about making them democratic in their ideas. Let them worry about feeding them for a while. Let them worry about all the insurrections that they have.
No, well, let's view this thing quite objectively. Let's say, well, let's let them decide what they want over there, because certainly it's their right, and let's pull out. I mean, let's pull out everything. Let's pull out our economic aid, and let's pull out our military forces, and then we're going to say to the kingfish over there in China, we're going to say, Mouchy baby, why don't you do the same thing? Why don't you pull all your troops out of here? And of course, he's going to say, fine. You know, we're going to pull them right out. And you know they're not even going to get out of their foxholes. They're going to be up there. And the minute we move out, the whole thing is going to be theirs militarily.
But that would certainly be the wrong thing to do, in my opinion.
But if we back out of there now, militarily, economically, humanistically, however you will, we're going to suffer for it.
Are you suggesting that the administration policy in Southeast Asia now is a good policy?
Militarily, it's the only one. Economically, it's fantastically poor. I mean, I get
that word.
I think beyond the military, we have no concept of what we need over there. And I don't know why this is, because we have the resources, people-wise and money-wise, to go over there and go beyond the military. Certainly no war was ever won by an army.
That's a rather major...
The Foreign Policy Association, in the material it sends out, says it tries to be factual and nonpartisan. As difficult as that is, it may even succeed, because every once in a while it is attacked both from the left and the right. We will look at one more of its discussion groups in a moment. These are not just groups of people who use foreign policy as an excuse for getting together for a little socializing. There are about 15,000 of them across the country with a membership of around 300,000 people. In every state, almost every town of any size, they meet 8 times each spring and discuss 8 subjects. This year they were the common market, Red China and Russia, Algeria, Spain, India, Laos and Vietnam, the Alliance for Progress, and peace. Our third discussion group, chosen out of the 15,000 more or less arbitrarily and for no particular reason, is in Little Rock, Arkansas. It is now trying to forget the notoriety of 1957, or the Trouble, as they call it, and is now promoting a downtown renewal program successfully and trying to get new industry. Its landmarks include the state capitol, whose dome is covered, they say, with 26-carat gold leaf, and Central High School, which surely will be a kind of American landmark as long as it stands. And the governor's mansion, occupied by Governor Phobos, now in his 5th term and causing some Arkansans to wonder if he will ever leave. 16 blocks away is a splendid 19th century mansion that was not burned in the Civil War, now there in a setting of magnolia, wisteria, and white columns. The portrait inside is of Major John Fletcher, a Confederate hero whose daughter, Mrs. D.D. Terry, lives here now and has in her living room a great decisions group, one of many in Little Rock. In addition to Mrs. Terry, the members include Clay Robinson, a lawyer in the State Highway Department, Father Boileau, a Catholic priest and philosophy teacher at a Little Rock seminary, Major Collier, a retired Air Force officer and Civil War historian, and the moderator, Victor Ray, publisher of a labor newspaper.
What I'm wondering is Southeast Asia important to us, and why is it?
This peninsula is a tremendously strategic area. It controls the shipping routes between India, between the nations in the Pacific. And if we don't stay in here and do something about this, then certainly Red China is going to take over. Economically, it is an area that is one of the greatest rice-producing areas in the world, and certainly Red China wants it for this reason.
But it seems to me the real question is not, is this area important? All areas are important, but they're more or less important. And I think our question as to Vietnam and Laos is it important enough to take the steps that we may have to take to save it from communism?
Now, I certainly hope we don't go into a Third World War over this thing. But I think we're taking that risk in the position we're taking there, and we know we're taking it.
This is not a kind of war we know how to fight. It's a jungle. It's a rough area. It's not one that's well fitted for modern weapons. It seems to me it's the wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I think we had better make up our minds that we're going to win. It seems to me that we're in a fight to the end with this Russian situation, this communist situation, and we'd better be prepared anywhere that communism raises its head and finds anything desirable. We had better be prepared to get in the game.
Yeah, but Ms. Terry, let me make this point here. Any person who thinks that you can localize one particular place in this earth and say this is where the communists will or will not fight, where we should or should not fight, missed the central point. They will fight any place they can gain ground. It happens to be in Southeast Asia at the moment. The very strategy and tactics is to fight you day and night, to wear you down through guerrilla tactics, to terrify you, to scare you, to browbeat you to a conference table where you are sure to lose.
Well, Major, I'm glad that we have somebody here who's privy to the minds of the communists and knows exactly what they're planning on doing.
I can't agree with the Major, especially if we get this idea that communism is all bad. There's no question about it. Communism is a theoretical advance in Asia, in China, in Southeast Asia. They are guaranteeing these people equal rights.
If all this is true, though, why do we have to build a wall to keep them inside?
Major, we can defeat Russia. We can defeat China. We can defeat these, but we can't defeat communism unless you have obliterated the cause of communism, which is poverty.
As long as you try to fight a guerrilla warfare with pure politics, you can never win. first you've got to defeat these people in the field, to drive them back, and then build behind
We
you
have made
this
tremendous
political system.
military successes in Vietnam. We have succeeded in Vietnam where the French have failed. We have succeeded in putting battalions in the field. But the South Vietnam are not going to fight for a corrupt system. Why should they? Why should I lose my life to protect Diem down in KAGO?
We can't go over there to these people who've never voted, don't know what voting is, and say democracy is what you've got to have. They haven't got any idea what democracy is. What does mean something to them, I guess, is the money we're pouring in. But the communists, it seems to me, have something in addition to that. They're pouring money in, they're fighting a war. They got something, a third thing. They have an ideology. They have something to give these people they can believe in. This seems to help them put their revolution over. Now, what can we sell?
Everybody here is younger than I am, and I should like to ask why this idea got abroad in the thinking of most of you people here, that we had no, what's the word, that they have got ideology, but we have no, where did that come from? Why, you've all read the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and why don't we know it? Why, we have got, if there ever was a country on earth that was born in ideology, I'm amazed at you. That's all.
I agree with Ms. Terry that we really do have something tremendous to sell, but today you've got to offer something more. There's got to be food and education and all these things to get the people ready for it, rather than just saying we're against communism.
I want to comment just one thing on what Ms. Terry said about what we have to sell to these people. Now, we certainly can't take the Constitution of the United States and Declaration of Independence, which are 18th century political documents, and try to impose them in a 20th century situation. We have to really be informed. And I think the real information we have to have is what are the conditions which allow a man to be free? And that's going to take health, it's going to take food, it's going to take education, it's going to take roads.
Bill, what does the city editor of the Arkansas Gazette think of it?
I don't think those places are or deserve to be considered governments in the sense that we think of nations and governments in our part of the world. They're so backward that I think that consideration should be given to this possibility, that the United States on its own, or the United Nations, simply move in and take over. There will be no more Laos or Vietnam temporarily. We just move in and take over and operate and run until the day when we think we can turn them loose to run on their own.
Well, I think in South Vietnam, we ought to stay there. In fact, I think we ought to extend it. And I think we ought to carry the war to North Vietnam and land our own guerrilla forces up there. Maybe throw a few bombs in a Hanoi cafe, Bomb of the Month Club or something, you know, and let the people of Hanoi know that they got a war too. Create the fires in their backyard. At the same time, carry what Father Wallow said, is exert every power that the government has against Diem and his government to compel these people. And if we have to go so far as to take them over, I think we should go that far too. I think we should fight to win. We can win and we should win in South Vietnam. And once we win there, I think the same pressure ought to be applied to Laos under the exact same circumstances. We should stay there and win.
Oh, that was a war.
We won the war twice in Korea.
We lost it twice.
We won it twice.
We lost it.
Again, not everybody is waiting at the RFD box to read Walter Lippmann, but very large numbers of people do use their spare time to learn about and argue about the great issues of foreign policy. One thing to conclude from it is that people generally are better informed and willing to support more advanced policies than the State Department and the government generally think they are. I'll be back in a moment. Next week, an interview with Newton Minow, chairman of the FCC, who, having labeled television a vast wasteland, is now retiring. Until then, thank you and good night.